Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Matt Simon. I'm Executive Director of the New Hampshire Coalition for Common Sense Marijuana Policy. And as a preface, I'd just like to express what I hope would be obvious, and that's the fact that nobody in this room wants to drive or ride on roads where other individuals are driving while dangerously impaired, regardless of the cause. The New Hampshire Coalition for Common Sense Marijuana Policy supports reducing penalties for marijuana possession. We support making marijuana legal for seriously ill patients whose doctors recommend it. We certainly agree with the Department of Safety that if stolen drivers are dangerously impaired, they should be prosecuted. In crafting drug and marijuana policies that make sense for the 21st century, we stress the need to differentiate between responsible and irresponsible use. Ultimately, we believe that responsible private use of marijuana by adults should be tolerated under the law, and that law enforcement efforts should focus on preventing and, when necessary, prosecuting drug-related behaviors which result in harm to others. Fortunately, although enforcement of our current DUI laws may not be uniform or perfect, the laws themselves are effective and should not be expanded. To be honest, I had not done considerable research myself on this issue prior to seeing this bill. So I thank the bill sponsors for giving me this opportunity to expand my knowledge. It is an important issue. It is something we need to talk about. When I need answers that I can trust, my first move is to ask people who have researched the issue more than I have. And on the issue of driving under the influence of drugs, I don't know any person who has researched more than Paul Armentano, who is currently Deputy Director at the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Mr. Armentano was gracious enough to submit written testimony, which is making its way around. And when I read what he had sent me, I decided that we should all have a copy of it. The shorter handout I provided is from the Marijuana Policy Project. It also contains what I consider to be essential information for the committee. And before I highlight just a couple of key points, I'd like to say that as a former college English instructor, it is a point of pride with me that proponents of common sense marijuana policy reform provide citations for their sources. And both of the testimonies that I gave you have ample citations of studies and things that you could, if you were so inclined, to look up. That is a point of pride with me, and I encourage you to check any source. With regard to this bill, the main point I'd like to make, I think, has already been made. We shouldn't lose sight of the purpose of our DUI laws. They're to protect innocent people from motorists who drive while impaired by alcohol or drugs. And a person who smokes marijuana, the high lasts anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. You can fail a blood test within 2 to 3 days of this happening. You can fail a urine test much longer period of time. Something like a chronic marijuana user who stops can fail a drug test a month or even 2 months later and would be guilty of driving under the influence of marijuana, would be guilty of a DUI a long period of time after ingesting the drug. So we're divorcing impairment entirely from the DUI laws, and I think it may reflect a frustration on the part of some that drug laws can't be effectively enforced. And why don't we just assert that the state has dominion over everybody's blood and urine and can take at any time to turn the ignition in a vehicle? I don't think the people in New Hampshire are going to like that very much. And just to conclude, a person who smokes marijuana only on Friday or Saturday nights, who never gets behind the wheel of a car after smoking, could technically be guilty of DUI every time he or she operates a vehicle in the state of New Hampshire over a span of 10, 20, 30 years. So I would suggest that if we go down this road of giving police officers expanded access to the blood and urine of New Hampshire citizens, we do so at our peril. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions for Mr. Simon? From the sheriff.
Mr. Simon, my question would be, I think it's a follow-up to a question I had earlier. Using the analogy of the driver or the individual who smoked over the weekend, and on Monday he picked up because he just drove erratically and saw something in the road or whatever. The word trace I can't get out of my head. I can't do it because it's just so minuscule. Is what it is.
It is. It's anything more than zero.
And are you acceptable? Yeah. Are you acceptable if a study were conducted to come up with what would be considered to be an impairment level as far as whether it be THC or whatever else is being ingested?
The problem is simply that it can't be done.
Okay.
Metabolites, THC metabolites are a benign byproduct of marijuana use. Their existence in the bloodstream or in urine is not symptomatic of intoxication, and there is no direct way to determine that. There's been research into saliva testing. Hopefully someday we can develop a roadside saliva test that would be similar to a breathalyzer. That would certainly help everybody who wants to craft a more sensible marijuana policy. But that's not currently available and not currently reliable. So we're kind of stuck. There's no way to tell whether somebody is truly stoned or not based on a blood or urine test, and there's never going to be, based on the science that I've encountered.
Do you feel that this goes above and beyond constitutionality?
I think that it goes very far beyond
Okay, thank you.
constitutionality.
The chair would recognize Representative Winters. Are you here for this?
Yes, please.
Recognize Representative Winters.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, no, another question. As soon as we get done with the question, of course. Representative Winters.
You mentioned THC levels. Now, if we use THC for cancer patients, for colon patients, would that show up in the urine and blood also
Absolutely.
as a positive for marijuana?
Absolutely. You know, the House is this year considering a medical marijuana bill that would make it legal for patients with a doctor's recommendation to grow and use their own marijuana. There have been many problems in other states, and you know, can a person lose their job? Can a person who tests positive for marijuana, who is legally using marijuana in that state, you know, certainly we believe those people should be protected. But this bill, I don't believe, should pass in any form, so I would hope that it wouldn't be an issue for medical marijuana patients should that bill pass.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you again. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Manchester, Representative Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee. I suspect most of my concerns have already been raised, so I'll try to be brief, and then you can wait until lunch before your afternoon hearings. But I'm very strongly opposed to this bill. I think this goes extremely far as violating our civil liberties. The idea that just driving a car, you automatically get sent to having your blood drawn is ridiculous. Even in the current seatbelt bill that's in the Transportation Committee, there are exceptions in there. If you have certain medical conditions, you're exempt from the seatbelt requirement. But there's nothing like that in this bill. I'd be terribly afraid of needles, but you have to waive your rights to drive or even ride an off-road vehicle. There are a lot of problems with this bill, and I hope the committee will find it inexpedient to legislate.
Any questions for Representative Winters? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair will recognize Mike Capino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't take long either. New Hampshire Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers opposes this bill as well, and I'll leave it to some of the very good testimony that you've already received with respect to the technical reasons. I would point out it's another attempt at a shortcut. The DWI laws are supposed to punish people who drive while impaired. This bill will punish people who drive even though they're not impaired. I was going to bring you all some poppy seed bagels or lemon poppy seed cake today.
A good day for it.
It would have been. However, I didn't have enough time to bake it. So, but had I done that, and you all ate that, you would have metabolites of opiates in your blood system. So it's not only the people who use drugs recreationally who can be affected by a bill like this. It is people who may have not used any drugs at all, but have partaken in everyday living. It's a bad bill. It's way overbroad, as Representative Sharon seems to recognize, and we would ask that you find it to be inexpedient to legislate. I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Attorney Capino? Thank you again.